sure some of you have taken time to ponder on the nature of what magic really is, and all of its gears, belts, and mechanisms. Many occultists, spiritualists, and magicians have taken the leap to define magic from their own perspectives and experiences, all of which providing a unique insight unto the fundamental nature, laws, and principles that dictates the mechanisms of magic. To some, it is purely mystical experience. To others, merely a science of psychology and hypnosis for self-transformative work. One of the most famous definitions from Aleister Crowley states that magic is the science and art of causing change and conformity with will, including both the mundane and the spiritual. This brings up a seemingly absurd paradoxical paradigm where everything is both magical and not at the same time. This absurdity, I surmise, comes from our limited dualistic perspective, we being almost incapable of even conceptualizing how such a union of opposites could exist simultaneously, beyond the yin and yang symbolism. Conceptualizing such an oddity would be on par to trying to visualize life as a hypothetical, two-dimensional creature. You can almost sort of get it, but the lack of experience and understanding keeps you right at the cusp of the epiphany. All truths are but half-truths. All paradoxes may be reconciled. I will be covering quite a bit of information in this lesson as we delve deep into my perspectives of magic and the deeper mechanisms that define it. I will be providing reference material to follow along with, but I highly suggest taking notes, as a single viewing of this lesson may not be enough. I will assume that you have a general understanding of the 7 Hermetic principles outlined in the Kybalion. I would highly recommend familiarizing yourself with such concepts before tackling this lesson. To give a general definition from my perspective, I believe magic, in regards to the mechanisms of manifestation and divination, to be the manipulation and understanding, both directly and indirectly, of probability and its outcomes in accordance to one's will and perspective. To explain my definition, I will be covering topics such as multidimensionalism, quantum physics, and other relative hypothetical and philosophical points. Now, with our current model of physics, we know that the material universe is merely a facade to a degree, that physicality is an illusion, as most of what we perceive is indeed empty space, and the forces of these subatomic particles. We also know that atoms and subatomic particles vibrate, correlating to the Hermetic principle of vibration. Keeping that in mind, we begin with the concept of quantum physics, most notably quantum probability, in conjunction with the infamous double-slit experiment. In the description box below, there will be a link explaining quantum physics. I would highly suggest at this point pausing the video and looking at that video. There are some groundbreaking observations and discoveries found in the properties of quantum particles through the double-slit experiment. Quantum particles, unobserved, act and behave as waves, meaning quantum particles are both in a state of being a particle and a wave. This is what is defined as the superposition, as these particles exude both polarities. When a particle is observed in the middle of its travel, it will break down the wave function and revert it back into a particle state, manipulating the probability of its position. This brings up an interesting conundrum on the law of polarity and the very concept of duality, but more on that later. The interesting thing to note is that particles' wave functions only break down when it is being measured or consciously observed. This has brought up a lot of speculation in the scientific community. Is it possible that consciousness and observance has impact on quantum particles and its probabilities and outcomes? It really leads one to wonder, but think back to the Hermetic principle of mentalism. Starting to make a little sense now. The takeaway hypothesis here is that conscious observance has an impact on subatomic particles, and thusly, the conscious mind is capable of manipulating probability itself in subtle ways. As the study and experimentation of quantum physics evolved over the years, many began speculating on the many worlds theory, that there exists an infinite number of universes and timelines consisting of all probable outcomes. This is where I begin delving into my theories on multidimensionalism, and how consciousness plays an integral role in not only manipulating local probability, but could also potentially manipulate the very dimensions we reside in. I'm sure many of you have heard of the butterfly effect. Some people hypothesize that with every action has an equal reaction, and with every action splits the timeline into two different directions, one where the action took place and one where the action did not take place. I will have a link to the butterfly effect video in the description as well. To begin understanding this theory, one must look at spatial dimensions. You and I are both three-dimensional beings, capable of perceiving and experiencing the world in three-dimensional space. There are three primary vectors or axes in three-dimensional space, which are X, Y, and Z. As you move up or down the dimensions, you add or subtract these vectors accordingly. Two-dimensional space only contains two vectors, X and Y, for example. One-dimensional space contains only one vector, X. And then the zeroth dimension is an odd conundrum in of itself. Not having a vector can be seen as either a complete absence of space or a point. As you begin to move up the dimensions, we begin to add vectors, the fourth dimension having four vectors, X, Y, Z, and W. This is where things begin to get interesting. As the pattern of vectors begin to seemingly repeat, the fourth dimension concerns our experience of time and how we perceive the passage of time to be linear. Think of time as being a slideshow of our three-dimensional universe. The third dimension, as we move up in scale, begins to look like the zeroth dimension all of a sudden. The point, once again. When you draw a line of three-dimensional cubes in series is when you get the fourth dimension and its passage of time and the slideshow effect. Notice how this line correlates with the second dimension being simply a line. As we move up in scale, we get the fifth dimension, which looks like a square of parallel fourth-dimensional lines. The parallel lines that make up the fifth-dimensional square are the infinite probable timelines of this universe. Finally, we get the sixth dimension, when we stack the fifth-dimensional squares on top of each other to form a sixth-dimensional cube. Each fifth-dimensional square representing all of the alternate and parallel universes. The pattern of the point, line, and square repeats as such as you climb up, but we are only concerning ourselves up to the sixth dimension in this lesson. As above, so below. Now giving credence to the idea that consciousness manipulates local probabilities, perhaps one could state that consciousness can also manipulate the probabilities of these timelines and parallel universes, and can dictate which we experience as well, like traveling back and forth between timelines in a fifth-dimensional plane. However, keep in mind that this hypothesis on the concept of multidimensionalism in the many world theories merely just a thought experiment. In my previous video, Meditation and the Mind, I discussed what consciousness is and the three major components that make up the trinity of consciousness. What you're looking at now is a diagram drawn up by Frater Xavier, giving a more easier to understand diagram of the relationship we have with consciousness. You can see now how only the subconscious mind is able to receive the information from the hyperconsciousness. This is why we seek to balance both the subconscious and conscious mind to achieve a divine union, where the whole of ourselves can transmit and receive data, ideas, and thoughts into the hyperconscious matrix that links us all together. Here I will play a clip of David Lynch.
If you have a golf ball-sized consciousness, when you read a book, you'll have a golf ball-sized understanding. When you look out, a golf ball-sized awareness. And when you wake up in the morning, a golf ball-sized wakefulness. But if you could expand that consciousness, then you read the book, more understanding. You look out, more awareness. And when you wake up, more wakefulness. It's consciousness. And there's an ocean of pure, vibrant consciousness inside each one of us. And it's right at the source and base of mind, right at the source of thought, and it's also at the source of all matter. This pure consciousness is called by modern physics the unified field. It's at the base of all mind and all matter. And they now say, modern science says, all of matter, everything that is a thing, emerges from this field. The ability to catch ideas at a deeper level, intuition grows. This field is a field of pure knowingness. You dive in there, you sort of just know how to go. You know how to solve solutions. It's like an ocean of solutions. And you can just feel this thing growing. But the ultimate thing for me is the enjoyment of the doing, the enjoyment of life grows huge.
As you unify these seemingly dualistic halves of your consciousness, you also begin to expand your awareness of the deeper machinations of the universe through synchronicities and intuition. You become more receptive of the quantum probabilities around you, and as a result are more capable of juxtaposing your intention and will and conjuring manifestations with your magic and spell work. You are not you at the end of the day. You are merely but a fragment of consciousness tied to an integrated matrix of infinite consciousness. Consciousness experiencing itself within and without itself. Aware yet unaware, and all paradoxes may be reconciled. The Divine Comedy, I like to call it. Hopefully I did not lose too many of you in this weird rambling on my hypothesis of magic. But if you don't understand it now, that's okay. Give it time. As you progress, you'll learn more and start to draw more correlations and conclusions. This isn't for everyone, so take it with a grain of salt. I'd like to end this with an excerpt from Mark Twain's Mysterious Stranger. If you can look past the surface-level dialogue trying to refute Abrahamic religions and the somewhat nihilistic undertone, you will find that even Mark Twain himself understood to a degree the nature of consciousness and the principle of mentalism.
For as much as a year Satan continued these visits, but at last he came less often, and then, for a long time, he did not come at all. This always made me lonely and melancholy. I felt that he was losing interest in our tiny world, and might at any time abandon his visits entirely. When one day he finally came to me, I was overjoyed, but only for a little while. He had come to say goodbye, he told me, and for the last time. He had investigations and undertakings in other corners of the universe, he said, that would keep him busy for a longer period than I could wait for his return. "And you are going away, and will not come back any more?" "Yes," he said. "We have comraded long together, and it has been pleasant for both. But I must go now, and we shall not see each other any more." "In this life, Satan? But in another? We shall meet in another, surely." Then, all tranquilly and soberly, he made the strange answer, "There is no other." A subtle influence blew upon my spirit from his. bringing with it a vague, dim, but blessed and hopeful feeling that the incredible words might be true, even must be true. Have you never suspected this, Theodore? No? How could I? But if it can only be true, it is true. A gust of thankfulness rose in my breast, but a doubt checked it before it could issue in words, and I said, But we have seen that future life, seen it in its actuality, and so—" It was a vision. It had no existence. I could hardly breathe for the great hope that was struggling in me. A vision. Life itself is only a vision, a dream. It was electrical. By God! I had had that very thought 1,000 times in my musings. Nothing exists. All is a dream. God, man, the world, the sun, the moon, the wilderness of stars, a dream. All a dream. They have no existence. Nothing exists save empty space and you. I? And you are not you. You have no body, no blood, no bones. You are but a thought. I myself have no existence. I am but a dream. Your dream, creature of your imagination. In a moment you will have realized this. Then you will banish me from your visions, and I shall dissolve into the nothingness out of which you made me. I am perishing already. I'm failing. I'm passing away. In a little while you will be alone in shoreless space, to wander its limitless solitudes without friend or comrade forever. For you will remain a thought, the only existent thought, and by your nature inextinguishable, indestructible. But I, your poor servant, have revealed you to yourself and set you free. Dream other dreams, and better. Strange that you should not have suspected years ago, centuries, ages, eons ago, for you have existed companionless through all the eternities. Strange indeed that you should not have suspected that your universe and its contents were only dreams, visions, fiction. Strange, because they are so frankly and hysterically insane, like all dreams. A God who could make good children as easily as bad, yet preferred to make bad ones, who could have made every one of them happy, yet never made a single happy one, who made them prize their bitter life, yet stingingly cut it short, who gave his angels eternal happiness unearned, yet required his other children to earn it, who gave his angels painless lives, yet cursed his other children with biting miseries and maladies of mind and body, who mouths justice and invented hell, mouths mercy and invented hell, mouths golden rules and forgiveness multiplied by 70 times 7, and invented hell, who mouths morals to other people and has none himself, who frowns upon crimes, yet commits them all, who created man without invitation, then tries to shuffle the responsibility for man's acts upon man, instead of honorably placing it where it belongs, upon himself. And finally, with altogether divine obtuseness, invites this poor abused slave to worship him. You perceive now that these things are all impossible except in a dream. You perceive that they are pure and puerile insanities, the silly creations of an imagination that is not conscious of its freaks. In a word, that they are a dream, and you the maker of it. The dream marks are all present. You should have recognized them earlier. It is true, that which I have revealed to you. There is no God, no universe, no human race, no earthly life, no heaven, no hell. It is all a dream, a grotesque and foolish dream. Nothing exists but you, and you are but a thought, a vagrant thought, a useless thought, a homeless thought, wandering forlorn among the empty eternities. He vanished and left me appalled, for I knew and realized that all he had said was true.